My name is Cassandra Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. I never imagined I'd stand alone at my husband Bobby's funeral, staring at empty chairs where my family should have been. Not my parents. Not Stephanie, my best friend since childhood. The people who promised to be there in sickness and in health disappeared when those vows were tested. What I discovered that day changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the true nature of love. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit subscribe, and stay with me as I share how the most painful betrayal led to an unexpected new beginning. Bobby and I met 5 years ago at a small coffee shop downtown. I was rushing to my nursing shift, exhausted after a double, when I literally crashed into him, spilling my latte all over his jacket. Instead of getting angry, he laughed and said, "Well, that's one way to warm up on a cold morning." That was Bobby, always finding light in every situation. He asked for my number that day, and I surprised myself by giving it to him. There was something about his warm brown eyes and easy smile that put me at ease immediately. On our first date, we talked for hours at a tiny Italian restaurant. He told me about his work as a firefighter, how he'd wanted to help people since he was a little boy watching the fire trucks race by his window. I shared my journey to becoming a nurse, our mutual dedication to service, creating an instant bond between us. Our relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Bobby proposed on a hike to our favorite lookout point above the city. The ring wasn't fancy, a simple solitaire that had belonged to his grandmother, but to me, it was perfect. "I don't have much," he told me, "but everything I am is yours." My parents weren't thrilled when I called to tell them the news. My mother's first question was about Bobby's salary. "Firefighting isn't exactly a lucrative career, Cassandra," she said with that disapproving tone I knew too well. My father was more direct. "You could do better." They'd always expected me to marry someone with prestige, a doctor from the hospital where I worked, maybe, or a lawyer. Someone who could provide the kind of lifestyle they thought I deserved. But Bobby provided something much more valuable: unconditional love and support. He cheered me on through my certification for critical care nursing, surprising me with study materials and bringing me dinner during long nights of preparation. He made me laugh even on my worst days. Stephanie, on the other hand, seemed supportive at first. She was my maid of honor at our small wedding ceremony, though she did comment that she was surprised I'd chosen such a modest venue when my parents had offered to pay for something more extravagant. What she didn't understand was that Bobby and I wanted something intimate that reflected who we were, not my parents' idea of an appropriate social statement. After the wedding, we bought a small craftsman-style house that needed work but had the perfect front porch where Bobby promised we'd grow old together, drinking coffee and watching the neighborhood change. We spent weekends painting walls and refinishing floors, turning that house into our home one project at a time. We talked about having children someday, but wanted to enjoy being newlyweds first. Bobby would come home from his shifts at the firehouse with stories that had me alternating between laughter and tears. I'd share the small victories and heartbreaks from my shifts in the ICU. We understood each other's work in a way many couples don't: the irregular hours, the emotional toll, the way you carry some patients and their families with you forever. My parents maintained a polite but cool relationship with Bobby. They'd invite us to dinner occasionally, but conversation was stilted and formal. Bobby always tried so hard, bringing thoughtful gifts and asking genuine questions about their interests, but they never fully opened up to him. Stephanie visited often in those early days, though she always seemed to make subtle comments about our modest lifestyle or Bobby's dangerous job. It was during our second year of marriage that I first noticed something was wrong. Bobby started getting headaches, not just ordinary ones, but intense pain that would sometimes wake him in the night. He dismissed them as stress or dehydration, typical of Bobby to downplay anything that might worry me. But then came the day he called from work, his speech slightly slurred, saying he felt a little off and was coming home early. It was so unlike him to leave a shift that I knew something was seriously wrong. As the headaches worsened, he finally agreed to see a doctor. Even then, he joked on the way to the appointment, "It's probably just all those spicy wings catching up with me." That was the last normal day we had before everything changed, before our vows of in sickness and in health were truly put to the test. I was organizing supplies in the medication room during my shift when my phone buzzed with a call from Bobby's captain. My heart dropped. Calls from the firehouse during the day usually meant something had happened on a call. "Cassandra, it's Captain Miller. Bobby collapsed during morning checks. The paramedics are taking him to Mercy General right now." I don't remember dropping the tray of medications. I don't remember my supervisor telling me to go. The next clear memory I have is running through the emergency room doors, still in my scrubs, frantically searching for my husband. They had already taken him for a CT scan by the time I arrived. I paced the waiting room, calling my parents and Stephanie, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Stephanie called back first, promising to come right away. My parents eventually texted that they were tied up with an important dinner, but sending prayers. When the neurologist finally came to speak with me, her expression told me everything before she said a word. The scan showed a large mass in Bobby's brain, a glioblastoma, grade 4. The most aggressive type of brain cancer. Terminal. With treatment, we're looking at maybe 12 to 15 months, she said gently. "I'm so sorry." The room spun around me. 12 to 15 months. Less than the time we'd spent renovating our kitchen. Less than the time we'd been married. Not even enough time to have the children we'd talked about. I felt Stephanie's arm around my shoulders as I collapsed into a chair, but her comfort felt distant, as if happening to someone else. Bobby took the news with characteristic bravery. When I was finally allowed to see him, his first words were, "Hey beautiful, don't look so worried. We've got this." Even with surgical staples in his head from the biopsy, he was trying to comfort me. The first few weeks after diagnosis were a blur of appointments, treatment plans, and paperwork. Radiation, chemotherapy, experimental protocols, second opinions. Bobby approached each with determination, researching options and asking intelligent questions that impressed his medical team. Stephanie initially stepped up, bringing homemade meals that filled our freezer and sitting with Bobby so I could shower or nap. "That's what best friends do," she said, hugging me tightly. "You'd do the same for me." My parents made one awkward visit to the hospital, my mother flinching visibly at Bobby's surgical scars and my father immediately bringing up practical matters, insurance coverage, disability benefits, our mortgage. "Have you considered how you'll manage financially?" he asked, not unkindly but with the pragmatic focus that characterized his approach to every crisis. "You might need to sell the house if this goes on too long." Bobby, even in his weakened state, reached for my hand. "We've got good insurance through the department," he said firmly. "And I've always been careful with our savings. Cassandra won't have to worry about that." I took a leave of absence from the hospital, using my accumulated vacation time and family medical leave to become Bobby's full-time caregiver. Our living room transformed into a medical space, a hospital bed, oxygen tanks, medication schedules posted on the refrigerator. I learned to administer his treatments, manage his increasing symptoms, and translate medical jargon for our friends and family. The radiation made him violently ill. The steroids to reduce brain swelling caused his face and body to bloat until he barely resembled the strong, vital man I'd married. Through it all, he remained unfailingly kind, apologizing when he couldn't make it to the bathroom in time or when pain made him short-tempered. "You shouldn't have to do this," he said one night as I changed his sheets for the third time. "You should be out living your life, not playing nurse to a dying man." I climbed carefully into bed beside him, mindful of his 4 lines. "This is exactly where I want to be," I told him, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. For better or worse, remember? The financial strains soon became evident, even with insurance. The copays, specialized medications not covered by our plan, and adaptive equipment added up quickly. Bobby's firefighter brotherhood organized fundraisers, but the expenses seemed endless. When Stephanie noticed me calculating costs at the kitchen table one evening, she offered to lend us money. "I got that bonus last month," she said. "Let me help. You can pay me back when things settle down." Grateful and exhausted, I accepted her offer of $3,000, which helped cover a special mattress to prevent pressure sores and some out-of-network consultation fees. It was the first time in our friendship I'd ever borrowed money from her, and something about it made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't articulate why at the time. As weeks turned into months, I noticed a subtle shift. Stephanie's daily visits became every few days, then weekly. Her texts were increasingly filled with excuses, work stress, car trouble, family obligations. My parents called occasionally, always asking about practical matters rather than how we were coping emotionally. 6 months into Bobby's treatment, we received the news we'd been dreading. The tumor was growing despite everything. His oncologist recommended a different chemotherapy protocol, but her eyes held little hope. Bobby remained determined to fight, but I could see the realization in his eyes that we were running out of options. That night, as he slept fitfully beside me, I allowed myself to weep silently for the future we were losing. For the children we would never have. For the anniversaries we wouldn't celebrate. For the growing old together that had been stolen from us. What I didn't yet understand was that cancer wasn't the only thing I was about to lose. The true betrayal was just beginning. As Bobby's condition worsened, the circle of people around us grew smaller. The steady stream of visitors from the firehouse continued, his colleagues bringing food, cutting our grass, fixing things around the house, but our personal relationships began to fray. I first noticed something was off when I borrowed Stephanie's phone to call the pharmacy while mine was charging. A text notification from my mother popped up. "Have you talked to Cassandra about what we discussed? Time is running out." My finger hovered over the message, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. I returned the phone without opening it, telling myself it was probably about a surprise to cheer us up or some practical help they were organizing. But a week later, I overheard a conversation that shattered that comforting illusion. Stephanie had stepped onto our back porch to take a call, not realizing the window was cracked open. "I've tried bringing it up," she was saying in a hushed voice, "but it's never the right time. She's completely devoted to him." No, I don't think she's thinking clearly about the future at all. Yes, I agree she needs to start making plans for after. After. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. After Bobby died. They were already planning for his death, treating it as a foregone conclusion while we were still fighting with everything we had. That night, after giving Bobby his evening medications and making sure he was comfortable, I checked our joint bank account. Bobby's savings, money he'd been putting away since before we met, had dwindled significantly. The medical bills were consuming everything despite insurance. What alarmed me more was seeing a series of withdrawals I didn't recognize, including one for the exact amount I'd borrowed from Stephanie, dated the day after she'd given me the money. Had I made these transactions and forgotten? With exhaustion clouding my mind, it seemed possible. But a nagging doubt persisted. The next day, Stephanie arrived with coffee and pastries, something she hadn't done in weeks. She seemed unusually interested in our financial situation. "Have you thought about what you'll do with the house?" she asked casually as we sat at the kitchen table. "It's a lot of space for just one person." "Bobby's still here," I said sharply. "We're not having this conversation." She backpedaled quickly. "Of course. I just meant eventually, practical considerations. Your parents mentioned you might move back home for a while after." There it was again. After. And now I knew my parents were indeed involved in whatever discussions were happening behind my back. "My parents mentioned?" I echoed. "When exactly are you discussing me with my parents?" She flushed. "We're all concerned about you, Cass. We want to make sure you're taken care of if things don't go well." 2 days later, I found an envelope of cash missing from Bobby's desk drawer, money his fire department colleagues had collected to help with expenses. When I mentioned it to Stephanie, She suggested I might have misplaced it or used it without remembering. Caregiver fatigue is real, she said with a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You're exhausted. Maybe it's time to consider a care facility for Bobby. The insurance might cover it, and you could get your life back. Get my life back. As if my life with Bobby, even in his illness, was something to escape from rather than the most important thing in my world. That evening, Bobby noticed my distraction as I helped him with dinner. Even with his cognitive abilities declining, he remained perceptive about my emotions. What's going on in that beautiful mind? He asked, his speech slightly slurred from the tumor's pressure on his brain. I couldn't burden him with my suspicions. The idea that people we trusted might be taking advantage of our situation was too painful to voice. Instead, I told him a partial truth. I'm just noticing that some people aren't handling your illness well. They're pulling away. Bobby nodded slowly. People get scared when they can't fix something. It reminds them of their own mortality. He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. But you stayed. You're all I need, Cassandra. The betrayals continued to accumulate in small ways. My mother called to suggest I set aside any valuable items in the house for safekeeping before Bobby required live-in nursing care. Stephanie borrowed my car for a weekend and returned it with an empty tank. A check from Bobby's union benefit fund arrived and mysteriously disappeared from our mail pile during one of Stephanie's visits. 8 months after Bobby's diagnosis, I finally confronted Stephanie directly. She'd canceled 3 consecutive visits, each with increasingly elaborate excuses. When she finally appeared on our doorstep with a flimsy explanation about car trouble, I invited her into the kitchen while Bobby napped. I need to ask you something, I said, setting down 2 cups of coffee. The money you lent us. Did you take it back from our account? Her expression flickered between surprise and guilt before settling into practiced concern. Cassandra, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? Because the exact amount was withdrawn the next day, and I didn't make that withdrawal. She reached across the table for my hand, which I pulled away. Honey, you're not thinking clearly. The stress is getting to you. Maybe you used it for one of Bobby's treatments and forgot. It happens. And the envelope of cash that went missing? And the benefit check? Did I forget about those too? Stephanie's face hardened slightly. Are you accusing me of stealing from you? After everything I've done to help. Before I could respond, we heard Bobby calling weakly from the bedroom. As I rose to go to him, Stephanie gathered her purse. I think we both need some space, she said. Call me when you're feeling more yourself. She didn't visit again for 3 weeks. By then, Bobby's lucid moments had become rare treasures. The tumor was pressing on critical areas of his brain, affecting his speech, mobility, and sometimes his recognition of people. But in his clear moments, his love remained steadfast. He would look at me with those same warm brown eyes that had captivated me in the coffee shop and whisper, "Still the best thing that ever happened to me." My isolation grew as friends from work stopped checking in, their discomfort with prolonged illness creating an invisible barrier. My parents called less frequently, their questions always centering around practical matters rather than emotional support. And Stephanie, when she did appear, seemed to be inventorying our possessions with her eyes, as if already deciding what might be of value. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't comprehend, was that despite everything, I wouldn't have traded a single day with Bobby. Even in the worst moments, his courage and kindness shone through. The way he apologized when he couldn't remember a word. How he still tried to make me laugh with jokes he struggled to deliver. His insistence on celebrating our anniversary even when he could barely sit up, presenting me with a hand-drawn card that simply said, "Forever." As winter turned to spring, I began to understand that the betrayal wasn't just about money or possessions. It was about people already erasing Bobby while he was still fighting to live and expecting me to do the same. By the 11th month after diagnosis, Bobby's oncologist confirmed what we already knew in our hearts: the treatments were no longer effective. The tumor had spread to other areas of his brain. Hospice was our next step. I'd like to transition to home hospice, I told the doctor, Bobby's hand limp but warm in mine. He wants to be in our house, in our bed. The hospice team arrived the following day, an angel of a nurse named Maria, a social worker, and a chaplain. They transformed our bedroom into a peaceful space with a hospital bed positioned to look out the window at the maple tree just beginning to bud. They educated me about the dying process, about comfort medications, about signs to watch for. Call your family, Maria advised gently. Now is the time for goodbyes. I called my parents that evening, speaking to my father's voicemail. Dad, the doctors say it's time. If you and Mom want to say goodbye to Bobby, you should come in the next few days. He called back the following morning. Your mother and I have that charity gala this weekend, but we'll try to stop by early next week. How are the finances holding up? Have you spoken with the life insurance company yet? The question struck me like a physical blow. He's not dead yet, Dad. Of course. Just being practical. You'll have arrangements to make soon. I hung up without responding and called Stephanie next. Oh, Cass, she said, her voice appropriately somber. I'll be there tomorrow, I promise. Do you need me to bring anything? Have you thought about funeral homes yet? Another person leaping ahead to Bobby's death, bypassing the sacred time we still had left. Just come say goodbye, I said flatly. But the next day, Stephanie texted that she had a work emergency and would come the following weekend. My parents left a voicemail about a scheduling conflict with their country club event. As people who should have been there disappeared, Bobby began the final stage of his journey with quiet dignity. There were moments of confusion and fear, but also moments of perfect clarity. During one such lucid period, 3 days after hospice began, Bobby asked me to bring him the lockbox from his closet. There's something we need to discuss, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Inside the box were financial documents, our wills, insurance policies, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Bobby's hands trembled too much to hold them, so I spread them on the bed beside him. I made some changes, he said, gesturing weakly toward the papers. Last month, when you took that day to visit your aunt. I remembered, my first time leaving him with a hospice volunteer so I could have a few hours of respite. I updated our will and changed my life insurance policy, he continued. The house is paid off now. I stared at him in confusion. Paid off? Bobby, how is that possible? A ghost of his old smile crossed his face. Firefighters take care of their own. The department's benevolent fund. I didn't want to tell you until it was done. I didn't want you to worry about the house after. Bobby, no, I interrupted, tears filling my eyes. We don't need to talk about after. He reached for my hand with effort. We do, love. I need to know you'll be okay. He gestured toward the envelope. Read this when I'm gone. Promise me you'll read it alone. I nodded, unable to speak through my tears. And promise me something else, he whispered. Promise you'll rebuild. Find joy again. That's what will give me peace. I can't imagine joy without you, I said honestly. You will, he replied with surprising strength. You're stronger than you know, Cassandra. Stronger than all of them. I didn't ask who them meant. Somehow I already knew. The next 2 days were peaceful, filled with small, precious moments. I read to Bobby from his favorite books. Played the music from our wedding. Lay beside him telling stories about our happiest days together. His colleagues from the firehouse came in pairs to say goodbye, each one embracing me with genuine compassion before sitting beside Bobby's bed to share memories or simply hold his hand. Bobby slipped away at sunrise on a Tuesday morning. One moment he was there, his labored breathing filling the quiet room, and the next moment he was gone. I was holding his hand, telling him about the cardinal that had just landed on our windowsill, his favorite bird. Maria, the hospice nurse, arrived shortly after I called. She helped me wash his body one final time, an ancient act of love and respect. When the funeral home staff arrived, I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you for loving me." In the terrible silence that followed, I called my parents and Stephanie. My mother answered, her voice controlled. "Oh, Cassandra, I'm so sorry. Your father and I will help with arrangements. Have you called the insurance company?" "Not yet, Mom. He just died an hour ago." "Of course, dear. But these matters need prompt attention. We'll come by this afternoon." Stephanie's response was similarly focused. "I'll be right over. Do you have the policy information? I can help you make calls." Instead of accepting their offers, I called Bobby's captain, who arrived within 30 minutes. He sat with me at the kitchen table, helped me make necessary calls, and asked what Bobby had wanted for his funeral. "A firefighter's service," I said. "At the oak tree in Memorial Park where we used to picnic." The department chaplain helped me arrange everything. Bobby's colleagues created a beautiful service with traditions honoring fallen firefighters, a ceremonial bell, a final radio call, his boots and helmet displayed at the front. The funeral home provided chairs for 50 people. I reserved seats in the front row for my parents and Stephanie. That evening, alone in our house for the first time, I opened the envelope Bobby had left for me. Inside was a letter and additional documents. "My dearest Cassandra," it began in Bobby's careful handwriting. "If you're reading this, I've gone ahead of you, which was always my greatest fear. Not death itself, but leaving you alone. But you won't be alone for long. You have too much love to give and too bright a spirit to remain solitary. There are things I need to tell you that I couldn't say while I was still with you. I've been concerned about your parents and Stephanie for some time. When I was first diagnosed, I overheard a conversation between your mother and Stephanie about my life insurance policy, a conversation they shouldn't have been having. I found Stephanie looking through our financial papers one day when you were napping. And the missing money you mentioned, I saw her take the envelope from my desk when she thought I was asleep. I didn't tell you because you needed their support, and I hoped I was mistaken. But as time passed, I became certain they were positioning themselves to benefit from my death. That's why I made changes to protect you. The house is now paid in full. My life insurance names only you as beneficiary, with specific instructions that prevent anyone from accessing it except you. I've arranged for a financial advisor, Sam Wilson, whose card is enclosed, to help you manage everything. I hate leaving you with this burden of knowledge, but I needed to protect you one last time. Trust your instincts about who deserves a place in your life going forward. You deserve people who love you for your beautiful heart, not what they can get from you. All my love, forever, Bobby." Attached were bank statements showing unauthorized access attempts to our accounts, attempts made using Stephanie's email address. There were also copies of text messages between my mother and Stephanie discussing the substantial insurance payout and how to guide Cassandra towards smart investments they could help manage. As the truth of their betrayal crystallized, I also discovered Bobby's journal. In an entry from just 2 months earlier, he'd written, "Cassandra doesn't see it yet, but they're circling like vultures. Her parents have called 3 times asking about my insurance. Stephanie keeps bringing up the house. They see her as an ATM they'll be able to access when I'm gone. I have to find a way to protect her without breaking her heart." That night, I wept not just for Bobby's death, but for the additional burden he'd carried, knowing that people who should have supported us were plotting to exploit his death instead. The following morning, I made coffee, sat on our front porch, and prepared for the funeral. For the final betrayal that I now knew with certainty was coming. The day of Bobby's funeral arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine, and a gentle breeze that rustled the oak leaves above the gathering space in Memorial Park. I'd spent the previous day in a fog of grief and preparation, coordinating with the funeral director and accepting food deliveries from neighbors and Bobby's colleagues that filled our refrigerator and countertops. I chose a simple black dress that Bobby had always liked, the pearl earrings he'd given me for our first anniversary, and his wedding ring on a chain around my neck. The funeral director, Mr. Patterson, picked me up promptly at 9:30 a.m., his kind eyes assessing my emotional state. "Are any family members riding with you in the family car?" he asked gently. "No," I replied. "They'll meet us there." At least, that was what I'd been told. My parents had called the previous evening with assurances they'd arrive early to help greet people. Stephanie had texted a simple, "See you tomorrow. Stay strong." We arrived at the park 30 minutes before the service. Firefighters in dress uniforms were already setting up, arranging Bobby's helmet, boots, and uniform jacket on a display table covered with a ceremonial flag. Captain Miller approached me immediately, enveloping me in a bear-like hug. "We're all here for you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Whatever you need, today or any day." As the designated start time approached, I kept glancing toward the parking lot, watching for my parents' silver Mercedes or Stephanie's red hatchback. The chairs began filling with Bobby's colleagues, hospital staff where I worked, and neighbors from our street. The department chaplain checked his watch and approached me. "Shall we wait a few more minutes?" he asked kindly. I nodded, pulling out my phone to check for messages. There was a text from Stephanie sent just 15 minutes earlier. "Emergency at work. Can't get away. So sorry. Call you tonight." My mother had left a voicemail. "Cassandra, your father's car is making a strange noise on the highway. We're going to have to turn back. So disappointing. We've called a mechanic but won't make it in time. Give us a call when you can. No real emergency. No serious car trouble. Just excuses thin as tissue paper, delivered at the last possible moment." "We should begin," I told the chaplain, slipping my phone back into my purse. As I took my seat in the front row, the emptiness beside me felt like a physical presence. 3 vacant chairs where my parents and best friend should have been. I could hear murmurs behind me, people noticing and wondering. The pitying glances were almost worse than the abandonment itself. The service began with the ceremonial ringing of a bell, the tradition that marks a firefighter's final call. Bobby's captain spoke about his bravery, his commitment to service, and his unfailing kindness. Fellow firefighters shared stories that made me laugh through my tears. Bobby's infamous chili that was so spicy it cleared the firehouse, his tendency to adopt stray animals until we could find them homes, his endless patience teaching new recruits. I had prepared remarks, but wasn't sure I could make it through them without breaking down. When the time came, I approached the small podium on surprisingly steady legs. "Bobby once told me," I began, my voice stronger than I expected, "that love isn't what you say, it's what you do. It's showing up. It's being present in the hard moments, not just the celebrations." I looked out at the sea of uniforms, at people who had shown up consistently throughout Bobby's illness and now in his death. Each of you demonstrated that kind of love to us during the hardest year of our lives. I spoke about Bobby's courage, his humor that never failed even in his darkest moments, his complete lack of self-pity despite the terrible hand he'd been dealt. I didn't mention the empty chairs beside me. I didn't need to. Their absence spoke volumes. After the final prayer and the folding of the ceremonial flag, which Captain Miller presented to me with formal solemnity, people filed past to offer condolences. So many whispered variations of, "if you need anything." And I thanked them automatically, knowing that most well-intentioned offers of help would fade as normal life resumed. As the crowd thinned, a man I didn't recognize approached hesitantly. He had Bobby's eyes and the same cleft in his chin. "Cassandra? I'm Jason, Bobby's brother." I stared in shock. Bobby had mentioned his estranged brother once or twice, but said they hadn't spoken in years due to a family conflict he never fully explained. "I know this is strange," Jason continued awkwardly. "We weren't in touch, but when I saw the notice, I had to come. He was my little brother." Tears filled my eyes as I embraced the stranger who carried pieces of Bobby in his face. "He would have been so glad you came." Jason glanced at the empty chairs. "Your family couldn't make it?" "They chose not to," I said simply. Understanding crossed his face. "Bobby always said you were the strongest person he knew. Now I see why." At the cemetery, the final goodbye was even more intimate, just me, the funeral director, and a handful of Bobby's closest colleagues. The department chaplain said a final prayer as Bobby's ashes were placed in the simple niche we'd chosen together during one of his lucid days. I placed a small carved firefighter's emblem beside the urn, a gift from his rookie class. The fire captain had arranged a reception at the station afterward, but I couldn't face more sympathy, more questions about my absent family. Instead, I asked Mr. Patterson to drive me home. "Is someone meeting you there?" he asked with genuine concern. "You shouldn't be alone tonight." "I'll be all right," I assured him, though I wasn't certain that was true. As I climbed the steps to our empty house, I remembered Bobby's words from early in his illness. We'd been discussing people's discomfort with his diagnosis, how some friends had already begun to disappear. "Some people can't handle the hard parts of life," he'd said. "They want the wedding but not the marriage, the birth but not the sleepless nights, the anniversary celebrations but not the daily work of loving someone. Don't be too hard on them, Cass. Not everyone has your strength." I'd thought he was being generous. Now I wondered if he'd been preparing me for exactly this moment, standing alone on our porch with the knowledge that the people who should have loved me most had failed the ultimate test of loyalty. As I turned the key in the lock, I made a decision. This betrayal would not define me. I would honor Bobby by being exactly the person he believed me to be, someone strong enough to rebuild from ashes. A week after the funeral, I was sorting through Bobby's clothes. The hardest task I'd faced yet when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Stephanie standing between my parents on the porch, all three wearing appropriately somber expressions. I considered not answering. The thought of their false condolences turned my stomach. But Bobby's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "Face it head on, Cass. Get your closure." I opened the door without greeting them. "Darling," my mother said, stepping forward to embrace me. I remained stiff in her arms. "We've been so worried. You haven't been answering calls." "Come in," I said flatly, stepping aside. They filed into the living room, my father carrying a foil-covered casserole dish, Stephanie clutching a small gift bag. The normalcy of these gestures, as if they were paying a standard condolence call rather than appearing after abandoning me at my husband's funeral, was surreal. "We brought dinner," my father said, placing the dish on the coffee table. "Your mother's lasagna." "And this is just a little something," Stephanie added, offering the gift bag. "A remembrance necklace with Bobby's birthstone." I accepted neither. "Why are you here?" My mother looked taken aback. "Cassandra, we're here to check on you, of course. We've been concerned." "So concerned that none of you came to Bobby's funeral?" An uncomfortable silence fell. My father cleared his throat. "That was unfortunate. Car trouble, as your mother explained." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't insult me with more lies." Stephanie stepped forward, her expression earnest. "Cass, I really did have a work emergency. My boss wouldn't let me leave." I felt terrible. Terrible enough to text rather than call? 15 minutes before the service, my mother sat down uninvited on the sofa. "Darling, we understand you're grieving, but there's no need for this hostility. We're here now to help you make arrangements and move forward." "Arrangements?" "Yes," my father interjected, looking around the living room with assessing eyes. "This house is too big for just you. We think you should sell while the market is good. You could move back home until you're back on your feet." Stephanie nodded enthusiastically. "And I've been researching financial advisors for when the insurance settlement comes through. There are some great investment opportunities that could really grow Bobby's legacy." There it was, the real purpose of their visit laid bare. Not to comfort me, but to position themselves to benefit from Bobby's death. "When were you planning to discuss the insurance with me?" I asked quietly. "Before or after you pretended to care about how I'm doing?" Stephanie glanced at my parents nervously. "We just want to help you make good decisions. Grief can cloud judgment." My father leaned forward. "Have you filed the claim yet? These companies can drag their feet if you don't stay on top of them." "Actually," I said, walking to Bobby's desk and removing a folder, "I have some questions for all of you first." I spread out copies of the documents Bobby had left me, the bank records showing Stephanie's attempts to access our accounts, The text messages between her and my parents discussing how to manage my expected inheritance. Would you like to explain these? The color drained from Stephanie's face. My mother's mouth opened and closed without sound. My father recovered first. Where did you get these? Have you been spying on us? Bobby found them. He knew what you were doing. That's absurd, my mother protested. We were only trying to protect you. That husband of yours was making questionable financial decisions during his illness. The medication affected his thinking. Bobby was more clear-headed on his worst day than you are at your best, I replied, my voice shaking with anger. He saw exactly who you were. Stephanie began to cry, tears that might have moved me once, but now seemed as manufactured as her friendship. Cass, you're twisting everything. We were worried about you being taken advantage of. Bobby wasn't thinking straight near the end. Is that why you took money from his desk? To protect me? She flinched. I borrowed that. I was going to pay it back. And the benefit check that disappeared from our mail? I never touched any check, she protested, but her eyes started away. My father stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. We came here to help you, and you're treating us like criminals. That firefighter filled your head with paranoid nonsense. That firefighter, I said, my voice deadly calm, was my husband. He protected me until his last breath, including from you. I pulled out the final document, Bobby's updated will and insurance policy. He changed everything, you know. The house is paid off. The insurance policy names only me as beneficiary, with specific provisions preventing any transfers to family members for 5 years. My mother gasped. He can't do that. He did. He made sure you couldn't manipulate me when I was grieving. My father's face darkened with anger. That's gratitude for you. After everything we've done. What exactly have you done, Dad? You didn't help during his illness. You didn't even come to his funeral. He was never good enough for you, my mother blurted. A firefighter? You could have married a doctor, had financial security, social standing. Instead, you tied yourself to a man with a dangerous job and a mediocre income. The truth, finally. I almost appreciated her honesty after so many lies. Bobby was worth 100 of you, I said quietly. He understood what family really means. It's not about status or money. It's about showing up. It's about love that doesn't come with conditions. Stephanie made one last attempt. Cass, you're not thinking clearly. Grief does things to people. We care about you. We just want what's best. What's best for me is never seeing any of you again, I interrupted. Bobby left me everything I need, including the clarity to see who truly loved me and who saw me as a path to money. My father's face hardened. You'll regret this, Cassandra. When the grief passes and you're alone in this big house with all those memories, you'll need your family. I have family, I said. Not one of them is in this room. I walked to the door and held it open. Please leave my home and don't come back. Any further communication can go through my lawyer. They left in stunned silence, my mother pausing at the door with tears in her eyes that might have been genuine remorse or simply the frustration of a plan thwarted. Either way, it was too late. As I closed the door behind them, a strange feeling washed over me. Not the crushing loneliness I'd expected, but something that felt remarkably like freedom. The first night after confronting my parents and Stephanie, I slept more peacefully than I had since Bobby's diagnosis. There was something clarifying about having the truth in the open, about no longer needing to make excuses for people who had never deserved my loyalty. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and made a decision. I would take Bobby's final gift to me, the freedom from financial worry, and use it to rebuild my life with intention. I started with small steps. I returned to work part-time in the ICU, where my colleagues welcomed me with understanding and space to heal. Many had attended Bobby's funeral and knew about my family's absence, but no one pressed for explanations. Instead, they covered my shifts when grief hit unexpectedly, brought coffee during long nights, and shared their own stories of loss and recovery. Captain Miller and the firefighters from Bobby's station remained present in my life in ways I hadn't anticipated. They showed up regularly to mow the lawn, fix a leaking faucet, or simply share a meal and stories about Bobby. They became the family that had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. "Bobby made us promise to look out for you," Miller told me one evening as he repaired our deck railing. "But honestly, we'd have done it anyway. You're one of ours now." 3 months after the funeral, I met with Sam Wilson, the financial advisor Bobby had selected. He helped me establish a foundation in Bobby's name that would provide scholarships for children of firefighters. It felt right to honor his legacy of service by supporting the next generation. "Your husband was incredibly thorough," Sam commented as we finalized the paperwork. "He really thought of everything to make this transition smoother for you." "That was Bobby," I said, smiling through tears. "Always taking care of others." As summer faded into fall, I began the painful but necessary process of going through Bobby's belongings. Each item held memories. His favorite flannel shirt still carried his scent. His coffee mug with the chipped handle remained on its hook in the kitchen. His reading glasses lay on his nightstand beside a half-finished mystery novel. I didn't rush. Some days I could only manage to sort through a single drawer before emotions overwhelmed me. Other days brought unexpected laughter at discovering Bobby's collection of silly socks or the love notes he'd hidden throughout our bedroom. One afternoon while organizing his desk, I found a business card for Jason, Bobby's estranged brother, with a note in Bobby's handwriting, "Should try again someday." After hesitating for days, I finally called the number. Jason answered on the second ring. "I found your card in Bobby's things," I explained. I thought, maybe we could get coffee sometime? We met the following week at a quiet cafe. The resemblance to Bobby was even more striking in the daylight, the same crinkles around his eyes when he smiled, the same thoughtful pause before speaking. "I regret not reaching out sooner," Jason said after we'd exchanged awkward pleasantries. "Our falling out was over something so stupid. Family business disagreements after our parents died. Bobby never talked much about it," I admitted. "That sounds like him. Never one to speak ill of others." Jason stirred his coffee absently. When I saw his obituary, it hit me how much time we'd wasted. "Years we can't get back." "He kept your card," I offered. "I think he wanted to reconnect too. That first meeting led to others." Jason shared stories of Bobby as a child, his fearlessness, his protective nature, his determination to become a firefighter despite their parents' objections. I found comfort in these glimpses of the man I loved before I knew him. Jason had a family of his own. A wife named Rachel and twin boys who had Bobby's smile. They invited me for Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings, incorporating me into their lives with a natural ease that made me realize what genuine family felt like. On the 1-year anniversary of Bobby's death, I held a small memorial at our favorite spot by the lake. Jason's family came, along with Bobby's firefighter brothers and several of my nursing colleagues. We shared memories and planted a young oak tree with a simple plaque, "Robert Mitchell, beloved husband, brother, friend." His love continues to grow. That evening, alone in our house, which now felt like truly mine, I opened a letter that had arrived in the morning mail. It was from Stephanie. "Cassandra," it began, "I've written this letter a dozen times over the past year. Nothing I can say will excuse what I did. Greed and envy got the better of me, and I betrayed the most important friendship of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I just want you to know that losing your friendship has taught me what truly matters, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the trust one squandered. I hope you've found peace and that Bobby's memory continues to bring you comfort." I didn't respond to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. It represented something important, an acknowledgement of the pain caused and the consequences of betrayal. My parents had made no such attempt at amends, maintaining through mutual acquaintances that I had pushed them away during my grief. As the seasons changed, I found myself volunteering at a grief support group for young widows and widowers. Sharing my experience helped others navigate their own losses, and their stories reminded me that pain, while unique to each person, is also universal. When spring came again, I made another significant decision. Using some of Bobby's life insurance money, I purchased a small cottage near the lake where we dreamed of retiring someday. The main house, our home together, I kept, unable to part with the walls that had witnessed our love story from beginning to end. The cottage became my weekend sanctuary, a place to hear the loons at dawn and watch fireflies at dusk. A place to feel Bobby's presence in the beauty of nature he'd so loved. "You were right," I whispered to him one evening as I sat on the dock, feet dangling in the cool water. I did find joy again. Not the same joy we had, but something new that honors what we shared. New friendships entered my life, genuine connections formed through shared interests and mutual respect rather than history or obligation. I became close with Maria, the hospice nurse who had guided us through Bobby's final days, discovering in her a kindred spirit who understood both loss and resilience. I resumed nursing full-time but switched to hospice care, drawing on my experience to comfort families navigating their own journeys through grief. The work was emotionally demanding but deeply fulfilling, allowing me to transform my pain into compassion for others. 2 years after Bobby's death, I sat on our front porch, the one where he'd promised we'd grow old together, watching a summer thunderstorm roll in. The air felt electric with possibility. The betrayal by those I'd trusted most had taught me painful but necessary lessons. That family isn't defined by blood, but by presence. That love is demonstrated through actions, not words. That loss, while devastating, can also be clarifying. Bobby had seen the truth about my parents and Stephanie long before I was ready to acknowledge it. His final act of protection, ensuring my financial security and independence, had given me the freedom to rebuild my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued me for myself rather than what they could gain. The greatest lesson I learned from losing everything was that I hadn't actually lost what mattered most. Bobby's love remained with me, not just in memories, but in the strength he'd helped me discover in myself. The ability to stand alone rather than accept conditional relationships. The courage to begin again. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or loss, I hope my story offers some comfort. True family isn't always who we're born to. Sometimes it's the people who show up when everyone else walks away. The colleagues who become friends. The estranged brother who becomes a lifeline. The neighbors who bring casseroles not to gain something, but simply because they care. Bobby once told me that the measure of a life well lived isn't in possessions or achievements, but in the love we give freely, expecting nothing in return. By that measure, his short life was richer than most that span decades longer. I still miss him every day. But now when I think of Bobby, my first thought isn't of loss, but of gratitude for the love we shared and the lessons that continue to guide me. If you've made it this far in my story, I'd love to hear about someone who showed up for you when it mattered most. Drop a comment below, subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience, and share this with someone who might need to be reminded they're stronger than they know. Remember that, even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone as long as we remain open to the unexpected connections that can become our chosen family. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be the person who shows up.